All right, when we get our Juniper box fresh from the factory, we're going to need to rack it and stack it and get connected somehow. So it doesn't matter if it's Cisco, if it's Juniper. Really, that means serial connectivity. Laptop, no modem cable, somehow getting connected to that box. So let's imagine that we have our device here, some let's say MX router maybe. We can't telnet in, we can't SSH in. Those services are not enabled. There's no IP address configured. Really, the only choice we've got at this point is to connect to the routing engine's embedded serial console. In fact, we have two choices. So we have the CON, so just the console, or an aux port, as you can imagine, or auxiliary port. It does not matter which one you use. It equally either could be used to connect to the device. Our null modem cable, RS232, going to a RJ45 jack, can be plugged in here. So let's say we've got some laptop sat down here, USB these days, I guess, connected to our RS232 serial converter. Bring up our terminal emulator and hit enter. We're going to see ourselves able to log in. We still need to log in. We still need a username, I should say. If it's fresh from the factory default config, there will always be a root user. So ROOT root, basically God on the box, can do anything, all privileges. And factory default configuration is no password configured for that root user. Once we're able to log into the box and configure an IP address, get it connected to something. Let's say we configure this FXP0 interface here, the management Ethernet interface. Maybe that's connected to some out-of-band management network if we're really lucky. We've got some engineering jump-off server over here. Now we're actually going to be able to telnet, SSH, FTP, maybe even TFTP or something, from this server over to our box. So all of those services are possible if they're enabled. By default, none of them are turned on. So when we've configured that console, that serial connectivity to the box, an IP address plus enabling SSH as a best practice is probably the first thing we've done. So as I mentioned, it could be SSH, it could be FTP. In fact, for file transfer, probably we should prefer SCP, or secure copy over an SSH session. We could have telnet, HTTP. We've got web GUI management on the box if we want, or I should say really, we can choose between HTTP and HTTPS if we want to be more secure. But all of that is only possible because we've configured an IP address and enabled these services on the device. And in this case, we're talking about connecting to the FXP0 management Ethernet interface. That's embedded in the routing engine. So we said this was our RE here, the brains of the box. Before any line card boots, before any of the gigabit Ethernet or ATM or serial or whatever else interfaces you got in the box come online, the RE will have booted and this FXP0 will have come up. So even if every line card is removed, we could still get some management in and out via FXP0. It's probably worth noting at this point that you cannot route traffic via FXP0. We cannot receive traffic in on FXP0 and forward it out on some other line card, or in on a line card and out on FXP0. This management is this interface, is purely for management purposes. So what else should we say? Well, I guess at some point, we want to actually configure some of the line cards in the system. So maybe down here we've got a couple of different line cards. And maybe one of these ports here is, gigabit Ethernet 0, 1, 2, 3. So line card 3, pick 3 down at the bottom there maybe. And this is port 0. Now we could configure an IP address on this interface and similarly SSH, FTP, telnet, TFTP, netconf programmatic configuration over SSH. Take your pick, whatever we've enabled, but only because we've actually taken the time to enable them. So in iOS, you're probably used to making line VTY configs and so on. Quite a bit simpler in Junos. We'll look at some config examples in a moment, but you're just going to go underneath the system hierarchy and enable the service you want. You might simply just say set system services SSH and commit. You can do a whole load of more fancy stuff. Limit the number of connections. How many rapid attempts to connect can we get before we're going to force a kind of hold down time on more connections. In iOS, you might be used to associating ACLs with some of that line VTY configuration. In Junos, that's not how it's done. We're going to talk later about input firewall filter against the loopback interface on a Juniper device. That is a kind of unified to limit all types of access to the management plane and protocol control plane of the box. So that is possible, but for now, just turning on these services, we're going to leave it open for anybody who can connect IP-wise over a production interface, so down here through production, or some jump off from engineering through an out-of-band network over to our device.